Today we had a little carbon fiber repair to do on the turbo bike for Steve, along with getting some prep done, and I tried to show a proper way to fix that fender that had a crack in it. Some of the other things are prepping up to get the paint ready, and this is all pretty Paintwork 101 stuff. We did manage to get a lot of stuff done today on a day it was pouring rain the whole day. We didn't get one break in the rain that we could even put some primer on, but it doesn't matter. Steve is not in a rush to get this bike out on the road. I think he's still doing some other work on it, of course, but we are going to try not to leave out any steps. That's the key thing for the people that want to really paint their bike. Now the weatherman says the next few days are going to be rain, and more rain, and then chance of even more rain. So I thought, since we're not going to ride, I'm waiting for the bolts for the mirror restoration, a changeover, what I'm going to do. I have some buffing on some parts to do, but I thought because it's raining, this would be a great day to share some information on Turbo Steve's turbo paint job. And this is going to be a little unique, a little different than what we normally do, because he's already got the parts in prime, so it's going to require, at least today, I can get the parts prepped, even if I'm not going to be able to paint anything because of the weather. Getting the parts prepped and ready to go will be a big step toward getting that job moving along. And the good news is he's not in any rush at all. He's not going to ride the bike. He's got 2 or 3 other turbo bikes, so he can be turboized. And by us having time to do it, we'll do it the right way and not skip any steps. But the really good news is we've taken advantage of several days where it's been cold, but it's been rideable. We've gotten rides on some of the bikes that normally we didn't get to ride for a while. So I'm ready for a day of painting, and I want to share some good quality information, especially if you're new to painting. Some of this information will be very, very useful to you, I hope. And I always try not to leave out any steps. Now we're taking a little break from the MT-09 project. I am waiting for these little adapters so I can adapt the other set of mirrors that I have for this bike. And there's a couple other little detail things. I have not come up with a solution for that yet. Several people have emailed me what they thought would be solutions. I have tried all of them. Believe me, guys, I have tried everyone. Nothing really floats my boat yet, but all that means is I'm going to have to think about it a lot more. I love the way some of the changes we made have worked out, the silver wheels especially, and special thanks to John Parthia, who many hours, you don't see it on the video, of photoshopping these things before they happen, and all the pictures I've taken that have allowed me to get this bike that I really feel now, as the summer's coming up, it's finally my own bike. And what we're looking at is several days of this, of just a mess. And we obviously won't be able to paint, but we will be able to get things prepped. So what I did, I had my cup of coffee, I looked over Turbo Steve's parts here, and I really don't want to compromise this in any way. These are parts Steve got. He did the prep, the sanding, and the priming. However, the priming is really rough. It's like 80 grit sandpaper. And these are collector bike parts. They're worth a lot of money. And I see this one's been repaired. So I'm trying to evaluate this. So if there's anything I can do to make it better, hey, of course, that's what we want to do. And here's the trick. He has several of the parts, the side covers of a motorcycle, that he wants an exact match on the paint. So I came up with a plan. I thought what I do is try to get the front fender. I'm obviously not going to do it today. I'll start prepping it and show in detail how I would prep a part that when I get a part and it's already in prime, I want to know if that primer, first of all, is sticking to the part. And in this case, I want to do a thorough cleaning. I noticed inside it's still got some grit. Well, there's going to be a lot of prep. And I think this is good information to share, especially if you're relatively new to painting or you really do want to paint your motorcycle. So I didn't know if you can see this, because this camera doesn't have a good macro lens, but this is a typical primer that's really, it's sandable Rust-Oleum primer, black. Now, the idea here is that Suzuki, I think, if I understand what Steve was saying, is they painted the black primer underneath the silver. Maybe that means that silver is going to need 3 or 4 coats. I don't know. That's why we're doing a test part before we paint the whole bike and find out, uh-oh, that isn't the reality to it, or the paint doesn't match. So the idea would be to get one part painted if possible. Now, the other part of this is I don't want to have this dirty like this. It's not dirty. Maybe Steve even cleaned it, but because what's going to happen is somewhere in the course of painting this, my hand is going to go there. I'm going to pick up the grit, and it's going to wind up over here, and I'm going to have fish eyes. So, as always, and I always say this, if people are starting on any tutorial I ever make, before you do anything, clean the part. And that's what we're going to do as the first step. So the first thing, good old simple green or crud cutter. And I'm more concerned with getting some of this clean than the primer, but as long as we have primer on it, I want to clean everything. Because you don't know where the fingerprints are. This is the whole thing in a nutshell. I don't know what contamination is under there. And we're going to be spending a lot of hours. This is not a little job that's going to take 10 minutes and we'll be done. This is a lot of hours, and I don't want it to be anything but the best I can possibly make it. So I want to get, this is just cheap insurance. And even though this probably is pretty clean, I'd like it to be as clean as, well, it isn't totally clean. But everybody's definition of clean is a little bit different. And I can see already something here that there's a crack here that I can fix before we actually get too deep into this project, because I don't want that to crack any further. And so even a little thing like this is doing all the little detail work. And if you, paper towels are cheap. Get the part clean. And rinsing apart, of course, get any residue you can off. Everything you can get off before you sand it is going to be a big help eliminating fish eyes. Okay, we're going to get some hot soapy water, and this is some sandpaper Steve provided for the job. Some Merca 400. This is good quality stuff. This is definitely that stuff that Luciano had that I don't remember the name of it, but not quite as good as this, at least not in my opinion, but this is good stuff. Now, I'm referencing Scott, who had a problem with the paint pulling up, and I always think it's cheap insurance to do this. If you're going to really press the tape down, don't be a baby. Press it down. That looks like we got a good bond, a decent bond anyway. But you never know. Now, in theory, you would want to do this where you're going to put masking tape. There's no masking tape on this. So even if you did have a little problem here, there's not going to be masking tape to make it worse. But if you're going to have a job with masking tape and stickers and everything, this is a good test to do before you go any further. Now, the thing is, you can never be too cautious about starting a project that you don't know. You're not down to bare metal or bare plastic. So I want to sand this primer. Now, there's a way, I think you could do a little test on this, and I thought, well, it wouldn't even be worth it. I could try, if we had a paintable day, just try sanding the primer lightly and then go out and put the silver on. I'm not so sure about that. Then I start to think, well, we're trying to skip a step here. I didn't like that skip a step thing. So what we're going to do, we're going to sand this judiciously and try to make sure that even with our bare hand, I can run my hand over it with a rubber glove, not find any rough spots. And then we'll be ready. Steve bought some black. We're going to paint the part black. And I see I have to fix this. I definitely have to put some carbon fiber, or that will crack. And then what will happen, Steve will have other hours. Now this is other hours into the bike. This is a bike that I'm sure Steve just got this, and he's got an extra motor for it or whatever. He's got 2 frames. He's got a lot of parts. So, and I know he wants to make it as good as possible. And we all do. And to skimp on one step, or skimp to save a rainy day so you can, I don't know. I don't like skimping. I don't like any of that. I'd rather do it right the first time or not do it at all. And some of the bikes that I've done, I've been tempted to skip steps. I've been tempted to try to rush it through. It never pays. It's always better to just pay the price up front, especially right in the beginning. Now, most of what's going to be a problem, if you have a problem with older parts, is to radius the edge. I say that right away. And you'll see high spots come up right away, because that's where paint is going to start to lift. It's not going to start to lift in here. It's those edges, getting the edges radius. And when I saw all the problems Scott had with his, I know that must be a heartbreaker. And believe me, the reason I know, I've had it with airplanes and I've had it with motorcycles too. And that's why I'm pretty fussy about getting a prep done. And I don't care how long this takes. We'll prep up as many parts as we can today, and we'll just have to wait for some weather. That's the bottom line. But these are going to come out nice. Overall, there's no major body work on this that I can see. No major things that have to be repaired, and that little reinforcement will be a good investment that we're not repainting this at some point in the future. And the thing is, if you are doing a bike that's going to go in a museum and you're never going to ride it or just put it in shows, that's one thing. But I know Steve, like the same as Luciano, myself, and everybody, we ride the wheels off the bikes. And they're going to vibrate. They're going to hit stones. They're going to hit potholes in the road. And I don't want to have it compromised. Now my objective is every step of the way to keep the part as clean as possible. I always laugh and say paper towels are cheap. They're really not cheap anymore, but I like to treat them like they're cheap because any dirt, grit I can get off of there, and especially here where I'm going to make a carbon fiber repair, I'm going to need to clean it very well. Then I'm going to have to sand it with some relatively rough sandpaper. And I don't want to have, if there's any grease inside there, any dirt, any who knows what. You never know. If you knew, you wouldn't have to deal with it. And get that clean and get it rough so that the epoxy sticks. Epoxy likes to stick to a rough surface, especially when it's plastic or composite. Now, you can see the crack here, and believe me, if that wasn't fixed and you tighten that bolt, you go for a ride a couple bumps later, or maybe a year later. I don't know. It's a problem. I like to use this. I got this at Lowe's. The clear weld seems to work real well. Brodak epoxy works well. This is carbon fiber twill that I have left over from the last roll of carbon fiber I bought. And thank you, Dave Midgley, for he made a nice contribution, and Dick Hewitt for contributing to carbon fiber. And I want to cut, this is really 4 or 6 ounce, I'm not sure. But one piece of this will be very cheap insurance that we don't have to repaint this part. Or the worst part, it cracks and that something else terrible happens. You never know. The epoxy, you mix it basically 50-50. Mix it. It's supposed to kick off in about 5 minutes. My shop conditions are cool. That usually means 10-15 minutes, but it doesn't matter. That's a good excuse to drink coffee. Here we'll get plenty of epoxy on, plenty. Squeegee it out with a Q-tip. Try not to get any on your hands or the table or whatever, or your nose. But anyway, this is now a part that before I work on this will be a good time to take a little break. Getting that laid out, if you happen to have a heat gun handy, a little bit of heat on that will help. Just get it curing, and it's just common sense here. The part has to be rough, it has to be clean. I want the epoxy to be thoroughly dry before we trim it and sand it. That's what it looks like when you go have your coffee. When you come back, or even better, you put it up by a heating vent. That is going to be the cheapest insurance, and it really cost us half an hour, 45 minutes, and we've got that covered, hopefully. So after a good cup of coffee, this epoxy should be dry. Yeah, it's almost dry. It doesn't matter. We can trim this off. I've got to put this aside to dry now till it's really totally dry, and that'll be probably an hour or so. And then I want to sand that edge in. Right now I can trim it because the epoxy is still soft. But I want the epoxy to be really, really hard. And then I want to sand that edge in. And this part will be, the final prep on this will be done. I can radius this edge in and do the same thing with this side. Do a final cleanup with M600. And this part then will be ready. And while this is drying so I can sand it, I'll work on one of the other parts. Okay, so this should be, in theory, that when you tighten this bolt, it's not going to crack up into the fender, hopefully. But here's a couple of tips. Don't try to sand this until this is really cured, and you're just going to make chewing gum out of it. And I can see that we're going to dress this whole edge off, and then not drill the holes until the very last minute, till we're going to make a handle here, because the more the epoxy dries, it'll make a nicer cut. If I drill into wet epoxy, it's just going to make a mess. And that reinforcement, and I've always suggested people do that. The minute, and even on a fairing, if you have a sport bike fairing, or doesn't matter what, as soon as you see a crack, this crack is only going to get worse. And it's going to work its way up here or here. And then eventually you got to paint the whole fender over. This way we've kind of I hope made this that's not going to be one of the problems. So the whole thing is I'm going to put this aside to dry, sand out the tail section. I can get that done. When I come back to this will be ready to just put the final radius on. And by the way, if we could, I'll put this up by a heating vent right now. That'll let the warmer you can make the epoxy, or if you're in a sunny area, put it out in the sun. The heat is your friend curing epoxy. And because we still have the heat on in the house, that'll definitely dry up. Now, I could start, I really don't have enough time to do the big part. That's going to be a separate thing. But I think I can get this part sanded out, prepped, check if we need any repairs on it. And I'll have half of this done in one workday. Okay, so it looks like the tail section's already had some repairs. None of the tabs look cracked. See, if these are cracked, then we'd reinforce them. If nothing's cracked, I guess we're good to go here. So the only part of this is going to be, we're going to spend some time detailing it, sanding it, and making it that it's not 80 grit sandpaper. And there'll be a lot of detailing in here and in the low edges. But then basically once this is done, we could work back on the fender and get that radius done. And that'll make half of the prep done. Then we need weather. I try to put the parts that are really just boring to live through here in fast forward, and make it a little easier to watch the video or get some idea of how much work is involved in this. I go back over a part several times until I'm happy that I can rub my finger on it and I don't feel any imperfections. I try to clean it as good as I can with paper towels and just not be cheap with the labor and not be cheap with the material, because this part really counts. So after cleaning and sanding, you can see the difference between the 80 grit, you can even see it, and the parts that are prepped. And that part should be ready now. We can get that radius on there, and we'll have 2 parts done by the end of this work session. And it's still pouring out there. Now the epoxy's dry now. We can get this radius on here. And I think this is going to be this was a pretty productive day. I'm usually happy if I can get this much done on a day that obviously you can't ride today. It wouldn't be that much fun. And we really can't paint. So that limits us to getting this done. And we did get it done today. So we're one step ahead on Turbo Steve's job. I know this bike is going to be beautiful when done. Steve is making up his own decals. He's got stickers. And we're going to get a... I think this is going to be super when it's done. Anyway, we're ready. These parts are ready. And we've got a nice radius on there. They're ready for the next step when we get some painting weather. So that's 2 parts ready for the black paint. Or we may have to. I'm not sure I'm going to have to put my primer over it. Yeah, I guess I have to. I keep thinking I'm not going to. Because over here on the back of the seat there is some... Well, there's a repair or body work or something there. And we'll try to get that because I want to sand the primer and get it perfectly level before I go on, just like I want to get this crack fixed in the fender, the carbon fiber. I don't want to spend all the time and Steve's money for the paint, and that paint is expensive, by the way, and be all done and you got a crack in it. So I think this worked out well. We wound up using a rainy day, and we're supposed to have 3 or 4 more of them. I don't know where all this rain is coming from, but it's spring. And that's why we always ride whenever we can. Nothing ever takes priority over a riding day. I did one final check to see if they'd be able to get primer on things. Not a chance. It's still dripping and drooling. So we live to fight another day. I'd say we got a good half of it done. The other 2 pieces don't need any repair. Should be a little better. I probably got 1 more day of prep, and that'll be ready for some paint. But all of the prep in the world is of no value unless you have weather. And just one final note, and thank you John Pothier for his help with the t-shirt logo. These t-shirts are available. The hot link is in the description of the video. So my point is always well taken, that you never use a day you can ride to do other work. But sometimes it doesn't exactly work out that way. Today we did get something done that I think was good. I think we were able to share some basic 101 information. And that thing of when people give you parts that are primed and you're going to paint them, it's really a good idea to do that test with the tape. Because a lot of times And I know other people do this. They'll just not wipe the paint or and just prime right over a chewing gum or whatever. I don't know. I've seen it all in my 65 years of painting, and I'm just trying to share good little basic information because I know there are really people. I've even gotten email from people and comments that they really have been able to paint their bike. And we post up something every day. Thanks so much for watching.